The distress signal reached the Cathara fleet just 3 days after the council meeting. A small human colony called Haven's Rest was under attack by Corvan slave raiders. The colonists had no military ships and no way to defend themselves against the heavily armed raiders who had come to capture them and sell them in distant slave markets. Teho stood on the bridge of Velkar's ship and listened to the desperate pleas for help coming through the communication system. The voices belonged to farmers and teachers and children who had done nothing wrong except try to build new lives on a frontier world. "This is your test," Humans said, War Master Kethram as he entered the bridge. "If you can prove that protecting the weak has value, then perhaps your strange ideas have merit. But if this mission fails or if our warriors are dishonored, then you will die and we return to our old ways." Teho nodded and turned to address the dozen Cathara warriors who would follow him into battle. These were not the greatest hunters in the fleet, but they were skilled fighters who had volunteered to test this new way of warfare. "For thousands of cycles, your people have been the hunters," he told them. "Today, you become something greater. Today, you become guardians." The universe will remember this day as the moment when the Cathara chose to fight for justice instead of sport. The warriors clicked uncertainly among themselves. They had trained all their lives to hunt and kill, but now they were being asked to risk their lives to save strangers. This went against everything they had been taught about the natural order. Velkar stepped forward to support his human friend. "War brothers, this human taught 3 of our young ones to be better. Fighters in minutes, he sees combat in ways we have never considered. If we follow his guidance, we may discover new forms of honor." The ship dropped out of hyperspace near Haven's Rest, and immediately the scope of the crisis became clear. 6 large Corvan raider ships surrounded the colony while smaller attack craft strafed the settlement below. Teho woke up in a room unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls were smooth and curved like the inside of a giant shell, and they glowed with soft blue light. The air smelled different too, with a sharp metallic scent that reminded him of lightning. His body was covered in some kind of healing gel that felt warm against his skin. The pain from his broken ribs was gone, and the cuts on his hands had already started to heal. Whatever the aliens had used to treat his injuries was far more advanced than human medicine. A soft clicking sound made him turn his head, and he saw Velkar sitting in the corner of the room. The massive hunter was watching him with those glowing red eyes and working on something with his 4 hands. "You are awake." "Good," Velkar said in his broken human speech. "My people's healing gel works fast on your kind. Your bones are mended and your wounds close." Teho tried to sit up and was surprised to find that he could move without pain. "Where am I?" he asked, on hunting. "Ship of the Cathara." Velkar replied, "You are first prey to ever see inside and live. My people are not happy about this. Why did you bring me here?" Teho asked. "Why not just kill me and be done with it?" Velkar stopped working on his project and looked directly at Teho. "For 300 cycles I have hunted across the stars. I have killed warriors from 1,000 different worlds. Some were strong, some were fast, some were clever, but none ever fought like you." The alien hunter stood up and moved closer to Teho. "You did not fight to win because you knew you could not win. You fought because something inside you will not let you surrender. That is rare thing in universe." Teho looked around the strange room and saw weapons hanging on the walls, trophies from Velkar's hunts across the galaxy, skulls and claws and pieces of technology from dozens of different species. "Your people collect trophies from those you kill," Teho said quietly. "Do you plan to add my skull to your collection?" Velkar made a sound that might have been laughter. "I already have my trophy from you, human." He held up his arm and showed Teho the scar where the metal shard had cut deep. "This will remind me forever of the prey that would not break." Over the following days, Velkar visited Teho regularly, and they began to talk. The alien hunter was curious about human nature and asked many questions about Earth and human society. Taeho answered honestly. Even though he was still a prisoner, he learned that the Cathara were an ancient race that had been hunting across the galaxy for thousands of years. They believed that only the strong deserved to survive, and that hunting was the highest form of art. Their whole culture was built around the idea that might makes right, but Velkar seemed troubled by something. He spoke of how his people had grown restless in recent years. The hunt no longer brought the satisfaction it once had. Many young hunters were asking what the point was of endless killing. "Homeworld dies," Velkar admitted one day. "The star grows cold and the planet cannot support life much longer. We search the galaxy for new purpose, but find only more prey to kill. Some of our wise ones speak of ancient prophecy about the flame that burns, eternal." "What is this flame?" Taeho asked. "Legend says it is warrior spirit so pure and strong that it could lead our people to new destiny." Velkar's eyes glowed brighter as he spoke. "Most think it is just old story, but some believe we will know it when we see it." Taeho began to understand why Velkar had spared his life. The alien hunter saw something in human determination that reminded him of this ancient legend. But the idea that a species of galactic predators might follow a human seemed impossible. As days passed, Taeho was allowed to move around parts of the ship. He saw other Cathara going about their daily tasks and noticed how they watched him with curious eyes. He was the first living prey they had ever seen on their ship. The ship itself was amazing. It was grown rather than built from some kind of living metal that could repair itself. The walls pulsed gently like a heartbeat, and the corridors curved and twisted in ways that seemed almost organic. Taeho met other hunters and slowly began to learn their language. It was made up of clicks and hisses and tonal changes that were hard for human vocal cords to produce. But he was determined to communicate with his captors. One young hunter named Kethtel became especially interested in talking with him. This hunter had never killed anything larger than small animals and was eager to hear about human fighting tactics. "You fight with tools and tricks," Kethtal observed. "We fight with strength and speed. Your way seems weak. But you wounded Velkar. How is this possible?" Taeho thought about how to explain human warfare to an alien. "Humans are not the strongest or fastest species," he said. "But we are very good at using our minds. We turn everything around, us into weapons. We never fight fair if we can help it." This confused Kethtal. "Fighting without honor is shameful among our people. How can victory mean anything if it is not won honestly, because the goal is not honor?" Taeho replied, "The goal is to protect what you care about. If someone threatens your family, do you care about fighting fairly, or do you care about keeping them safe?" This idea seemed to disturb the young hunter, but also interest him. The Cathara had always believed that how you won was more important than why you fought. But Taeho was suggesting that the reason for fighting might matter more than the method. Velkar watched these conversations with growing fascination. He began to show Taeho recordings of their hunts, expecting the human to be impressed by their skill and strength. Instead, Taeho asked questions that the hunter had never considered. "Why do you hunt the weak?" Taeho asked after watching a video of Cathara slaughtering peaceful farmers on some distant world. "What honor is there in killing those who cannot fight back?" "We hunt to prove our strength," Velkar replied. "The weak exist to serve the strong. This is natural law, but you are already strong." Taeho pointed out, "Everyone in the galaxy knows. The Cathara are powerful hunters. You do not need to prove anything, so why do you keep killing?" This question bothered Velkar more than he wanted to admit. His people had always hunted because that was what they did. It was their nature, their culture, their reason for existing. But when a human asked why, the answer seemed less clear. The conversation that changed everything happened on Taeho's 10th day on the ship. Velkar brought him to the observation deck, where they could look out at the stars. "Soon we will reach new hunting ground," Velkar said. "There is Colony World, there with millions of humans. Your people will provide sport for many cycles." Taeho felt cold horror wash over him. These alien killers were planning to slaughter an entire human colony for entertainment. Millions of innocent people would die just so the Cathara could have fun hunting. "You cannot do this," he said quietly. "Why not?" Velkar asked, genuinely curious. "They are weak. We are strong. This is how universe works." "Because they are not warriors," Taeho replied. "They are families with children who just want to live their lives in peace. What strength does it take to kill a child? What honor is there in destroying a school Velkar had never thought about? Their prey as individuals with lives and families. They were just targets that ran and screamed and died. But listening to Taeho talk about them as people made the hunter uncomfortable. Your people have great strength and skill." Taeho continued. "What if you used those gifts to protect the innocent instead of killing them? What if instead of being feared across the galaxy you were respected as guardians?" This idea was so foreign to Cathara, thinking that Velkar could barely understand it. Protect the weak. Why would strong warriors waste time guarding those who could not guard themselves? Because that is what real strength is, for Taeho said quietly. Not to take from those weaker than you, but to shield them from those who would harm. Them true warriors fight for something greater than themselves. Velkar stared out at the stars and felt something stirring in his mind that had never been there before. For the first time in his long life, he was questioning everything his people believed about strength and honor and the purpose of being a warrior. Perhaps the small human was right. Perhaps the flame that burns eternal was not just about fighting spirit, but about what that spirit chose to fight for. The alien hunter made a decision that would reshape the destiny of his entire species. "We will not hunt the colony," he announced. "I will call Council of War leaders. There are things we must discuss." The first blow from Velkar sent Taeho flying across the engine room and crashing into a control panel. The metal pipe he was using as a weapon bent when it hit the alien hunter's thick hide. Taeho felt his ribs crack and blood filled his mouth. But he got back up. Velkar watched with interest as the human wiped blood from his lips and picked up another piece of metal. Most prey would be crying or begging by now, but this one just looked angry. The human's eyes burned with a fire that reminded the hunter of his own warrior ancestors. Taeho charged again, knowing he was too slow and too weak, but refusing to give up. He swung his makeshift weapon at Velkar's leg, but the alien easily caught his arm with one massive hand. The hunter could have crushed every bone, but instead he just threw Taeho against another wall. The human hit the wall hard enough to crack the metal, but somehow he rolled when he landed and came up with a piece of broken glass in his hand. Without hesitation, he threw it at Velkar's face. The alien had to duck, and the glass cut a small line across his cheek. Green blood dripped to the floor, and Velkar touched the wound with surprise. "First blood to the human," he said with what sounded like approval. 1. More to go. Taeho could barely stand, but he would not quit. He grabbed a handful of metal shavings from the floor, and when Velkar came close, he threw them at the hunter's eyes. The alien roared and stepped back, clawing at his face. While Velkar was distracted, Taeho found a broken plasma conduit that was still sparking with electricity. He grabbed it with both hands, even though it burned his skin, and jabbed it into the hunter's leg. The electrical shock made Velkar jump backward and more. Green blood flowed from the wound. "Second blood," the alien said, and now his voice held real respect. "You fight like demons, small human." But Taeho was finished. His body was broken and bleeding, and he could not even lift his arms anymore. He fell to his knees and waited for death to come. Velkar stood over him, ready to deliver the final blow, but something made him pause. The human was defeated, but he still glared up at the hunter with unbroken defiance. Even facing certain death, the tiny warrior refused to bow his head. The alien hunter had killed thousands of beings across hundreds of worlds. He had seen every kind of courage and every kind of fear. But he had never seen anything like this absolute refusal to surrender. This human would die before he would admit defeat. More clicking sounds came from outside the engine room, and 3 other alien hunters entered to see what was taking so long. They were smaller than Velkar, but still much larger than any human. Their eyes glowed in the darkness, and their claws scraped against the metal floor. The newcomers looked at their wounded leader with shock and confusion. No prey had ever hurt Velkar before. The greatest hunter of their people was bleeding from wounds given to him by a tiny, weak creature that should have died instantly. Watch and learn, Velkar told them in their clicking language. This human shows what true warrior spirit looks like. He reached down and lifted Taiho to his feet. The human could not stand on his own, but his eyes still burned with that unquenchable fire. You have drawn blood twice, Velkar said in human speech. You need one more to win freedom, but you are too hurt to continue. Taiho tried to speak, but only blood came out of his mouth. Haskal Tao tried to raise his fists, but his arms would not obey him. His body was completely broken, but something inside him refused to quit. Give me moment, Taiho finally whispered. Just one more moment. Velkar was amazed. The human could not even stand without help, but he still wanted to continue fighting. The alien hunter had never encountered such an iron will in any creature. The other hunters clicked among themselves in their own language. They could not understand why their leader was wasting time with this pathetic prey. Why not just kill it and move on to find better hunting? But Velkar was beginning to see something they could not. This human possessed something his people valued above all else. The fire that burns in the heart of a true warrior. The spirit that never surrenders, no matter how hopeless the situation becomes. Very well, Velkar said. I give you one more chance, but you must strike the killing blow. If you can cut me deep enough to scar, I will call you brother and let you live. Taiho looked around the destroyed engine room and saw a piece of sharp metal that had broken off during their fight. It was jagged and pointed, and if he could drive it deep enough, it might actually hurt the massive alien. Using every bit of strength he had left, Taiho picked up the metal shard. It felt as heavy as a mountain in his trembling hands, but he managed to lift it. He looked at Velkar and saw that the hunter was not defending himself. The alien was giving him a free shot at a vital area. This was not about winning or losing anymore. This was about proving that the human spirit could not be broken. Taiho stepped forward and drove the metal shard into Velkar's shoulder, pushing it deep into the thick alien hide green. Blood flowed freely, and the wound would leave a permanent scar. Third blood, Velkar said, and his voice was full of respect. You have earned your life, little warrior. But something even more important had happened during their fight. The other hunters had watched in amazement as this tiny human refused to surrender against impossible odds. They had seen courage that exceeded anything in their own warrior traditions. One of the younger hunters stepped forward and spoke in halting human words. You fight good, small one. You have spirit of true hunter. Another hunter clicked his approval and touched his own chest in what Taiho somehow knew was a gesture of respect. These alien killers who had slaughtered his friends were now treating him as an equal. Velkar helped Taiho sit down against a wall and offered him water from his own supply. The human's body was broken, but his spirit shone brighter than ever. Tell me, human, what drives you to fight when there is no hope of victory? Velkar asked. Taiho looked at the alien hunter and spoke in a voice that was weak but steady. Because someone has to. My friends died because they were good people trying to make a living in dangerous space. If I give up, then their deaths mean nothing. The alien hunters exchanged clicking sounds among themselves. They were discussing something important in their own language. Taiho could not understand the words. but he could hear the tone of argument and debate. Finally, Velkar spoke again. You interest me, human. Your people have something my people have forgotten. We hunt for trophies and glory, but you fight for something greater. You fight for others even when they are dead. The massive hunter paused and seemed to be thinking deeply about something. Then he made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. I take you to our ship, he announced. You will heal, and then we will see what other surprises your species holds. Perhaps it is time for the hunters to learn from the hunted. The other aliens clicked in shock. This was against all their traditions. Prey was meant to be killed, not adopted. But Velkar was their leader, and his word was law. Teho tried to protest, but his strength was gone. The fight had taken everything he had, and darkness was closing in around the edges of his vision. As consciousness faded, he heard Velkar speaking to the other hunters in their clicking language. He could not understand the words, but somehow he knew his life had just changed in ways he could never have imagined. The last thing he saw before everything went black was the alien hunter looking down at him with something that might have been respect or curiosity or perhaps the beginning of understanding between two very different kinds of warrior. Teho ran through the dark corridors of his ship, with his heart beating so fast he thought it might explode. The clicking sounds followed him everywhere he went, but he could not see what was making them. The emergency lights cast strange shadows. On the walls, and every shadow looked like it might be one of the creatures that had taken his friends. He reached the engine room and sealed the heavy door behind him. This was the place he knew best on the whole ship. Jin Wu had taught him every pipe and wire and control panel. Maybe here he could find a way to fight back, or at least survive until help came. But deep down, Teho knew no help was coming. They were too far from any other ships, and the aliens had disabled their communication systems. He was alone with creatures that killed for fun, and he was going to die, just like his friends. The clicking sounds stopped, and the ship became very quiet. Teho could hear his own breathing and the soft hum of the life support systems. Nothing else. The silence was worse than the clicking, because now he did not know where the hunters were. Teho looked around the engine room and started to think like an engineer instead of a scared man. If these creatures wanted to hunt him, they would have to come to him, and when they did, he would be ready. He went to the mining equipment storage and found containers of explosive charges. These were used to break apart asteroids for mining, but they would work just as well against alien hunters. He also found plasma cutters and welding tools and heavy metal cables, working as quietly as he could. Teho began to set traps throughout the engine room. He placed explosive charges behind control panels and connected them to motion sensors. He ran cables across walkways at ankle height. He positioned plasma cutters to fire automatically when doors opened. The mining ship had powerful lasers for cutting through rock. Teho reprogrammed them to fire inward instead of outward. Now, the engine room was full of invisible laser beams that would slice anything that moved through them. He found a gravity control unit and set it to create random gravity fields. Anyone walking through the room would suddenly find themselves thrown against walls or floating helplessly in the air. The ship's cooling system used super-cold liquid that would freeze anything it touched. Teho broke open the cooling pipes and flooded parts of the floor with the dangerous liquid. When he was finished, the engine room looked normal, but it was actually a deadly maze. Any creature that entered would face explosions and lasers and freezing liquid and gravity traps all at the same time. Teho hid behind a large engine and waited. He had only one plasma cutter, left for himself, but he felt better knowing he had done everything possible to fight back. His friends deserved to be remembered as people who did not give up without a fight. The door to the engine room made a soft hissing sound as it opened. Teho held his breath and waited to see what would happen. At first, nothing seemed to enter the room. But then he heard the soft sound of claws on metal moving very slowly and carefully. The creature was being cautious, which meant it was smart. Suddenly, the air in front of the door shimmered like heat waves, and a shape began to appear. It was tall, much taller than any human, with 4 arms that ended in razor-sharp claws. Its skin was dark and seemed to change colors like a lizard. Its head was long, with mandibles that clicked together and eyes that glowed red in the dark. This was Velkar, the leader of the hunting pack, and he was magnificent and terrifying at the same time. He moved with the grace of a natural predator, but also with the intelligence of a being that had hunted across the galaxy for many years. Velkar stepped into the engine room expecting to find a cowering human begging for mercy. Instead, he walked directly into Tai-Ho's first trap. A motion sensor detected him and triggered an explosive charge. The explosion threw the alien hunter against a wall, but he rolled away just as a plasma beam cut through the air where his head had been. Velkar roared in surprise and pain. Green blood ran down his arm where metal fragments had cut him. For the first time in his long hunting career, Velkar had been wounded by his prey. The alien hunter looked around the engine room with new respect. This human had turned his own ship into a weapon. Every surface might hide. A trap, every shadow might conceal death. The prey was fighting back with creativity and intelligence. Velkar tried to move forward, but gravity suddenly reversed and slammed him into the ceiling. Then it switched again and dropped him to the floor, where freezing coolant splashed across his legs. The cold burned his skin and made him roar again. Tai-Ho stepped out from behind the engine with his plasma cutter ready. "You want to hunt?" he shouted. "Then let me show you how humans hunt." He fired the plasma cutter at a fuel line, which exploded and sent burning liquid across the room. Velkar had to jump and roll to avoid being burned. His camouflage flickered and failed as he moved. The hunter tried to reach Tai-Ho, but laser beams crisscrossed. His path and cables tangled his feet. Every step was dangerous. Every movement brought new attacks from the modified ship systems. Velkar had hunted hundreds of species across the galaxy. Some had been strong, some had been fast, some had been smart, but none had ever fought like this. The human was using everything around him as a weapon, turning his own environment into an ally. When Velkar finally reached the center of the room where Tai-Ho waited, he was bleeding from a dozen cuts and burns. His pride was wounded even more than his body. No prey had ever made him work this hard for a kill. But when he looked into the human's eyes, he saw something that stopped him cold. There was no fear there. None at all. Just cold determination and a burning anger that seemed to come from the human's very soul. Tai-Ho raised his plasma cutter and pointed it at Velkar's chest. "Come on." "Then," he said quietly, "finish what you started, but know that I will make you pay for every one of my friends you killed." Velkar stared at this impossible human. This tiny, weak creature that should have died in the first few seconds of the hunt instead stood ready to fight a being 3 times his size. The human's body was shaking with exhaustion, but his spirit burned bright and unbroken. The alien hunter had seen courage before, but this was different. This human was not just brave. He was absolutely refusing to accept defeat, even when defeat was certain. His mind had turned everything around him into weapons, and his will had not bent even when facing certain death. For reasons Velkar did not understand, he found himself curious about this strange creature. Instead of killing the human immediately, he did something he had never done before in all his years of hunting. He began to speak. "Your friends fought well," the alien said in broken human language, learned from previous hunts, "but they fought with fear. You fight with anger." Why Tai-Ho kept his weapon pointed at the hunter's chest? "Because they were good people, and you killed them for fun. That makes you a monster, and monsters need to be stopped." Velkar clicked his mandibles in what might have been laughter among his kind. "You are small and weak. Your weapons are simple. Your ship is slow, yet you wounded me. No prey has ever wounded me before. I am not prey. Taeho said, I am a human, and humans do not give up. The alien hunter studied this defiant creature for a long moment. Then he made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He retracted his claws and stood up straight. I offer you choice, he said. You can die quick like others, or you can prove you are warrior. Fight me with honor. If you draw my blood 3 times, I let you live. If not, you die, but you die as warrior, not. As Prey Taeho looked at the massive alien hunter and knew he had no chance of winning a fair fight. But he also knew he would rather die fighting than live, knowing he had surrendered. He dropped his plasma cutter and picked up a piece of broken metal pipe. I accept your challenge, he said. Velkar smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Good. Then let us see what kind of warrior burns inside this small human body. Captain Kim Taeho stood on the bridge of his mining ship and watched the stars through the wide front window. The ship was called New Seoul, and it had been his home for 3 years now. He loved the quiet hum of the engines and the way the lights blinked on the control panels around him. His crew was small, but they were like family to him. Park. Jin-woo was working in the engine room as always. Jin-woo had been Taeho's best friend since they were kids. Growing up on Earth, they had joined the space mining company together and promised to always watch each other's backs. Jin-woo was the best engineer Taeho had ever seen. He could fix anything and make old machines work like new ones. Dr. Lee. So-young was in the medical bay checking supplies. So-young was quiet and smart, and she took care of everyone on the ship like they were her own children. She had joined them 2 years ago after her husband died in a mining accident on Mars. Taeho knew she still missed him, but she never let her. Sadness show when someone needed her help. The other 9 crew members were good people too. There was old Kim Dong-soo who told the best stories. There was young Lee Min-ho who could cook amazing meals from basic food supplies. There was Park Sun-mi, who knew more about space navigation than most computer systems. Each person had their own job and their own place on the ship. They were far from Earth now, in a part of space where few ships ever traveled. The planet below them was dead and gray, but it was full of rare crystals that were worth a lot of money. These crystals powered the newest spaceships and space stations back home. The mining work was hard and dangerous, but the pay was good. Taeho was reading the daily reports when the alarm started beeping. He looked at the sensor screen and saw something that made his heart beat faster. A large object was moving toward them from behind the dead planet. It was big, much bigger than their ship, and it was coming fast. Jin-woo's voice came through the speaker from the engine room. Captain, we have a problem. The sensors are showing something huge out there, and it does not match any ship design in our database. Taeho pressed the communication button. All crew to stations. Now, this is not a drill. Something is coming and we need to be ready. He felt sweat on his hands as he watched the unknown object get closer and closer. So-young appeared on the bridge carrying her medical kit. Her face was calm, but Taeho could see worry in her eyes. What do you think it is? She asked quietly. I do not know, Taeho said. But we need to be careful. Jin-woo, can you get the engines ready to run if we need to? Already working on it, came Jin-woo's reply. But Captain, this thing is massive. I have never seen anything like it on the sensors. The unknown ship came around the planet, and Taeho got his first look at it through the front window. His mouth fell open in shock. The ship was not like anything humans had ever built. It looked almost alive, with a dark surface covered in sharp points and ridges. It was at least 3 times bigger than New Seoul, and it moved in a way that seemed too smooth for something so large. The strange ship had no visible engines or weapons, but something about it made Taeho feel afraid deep in his stomach. It looked like it was built for hunting, not for carrying cargo or people. The way it moved reminded him of a shark circling its prey. Captain. What should we do? Asked Min-ho from his post at the me. Navigation controls. His young voice shook a little. Try to contact them, Taeho said. Send them a standard greeting message. Let them know we are just miners, and we mean no harm. Maybe they are friendly. Minho worked at his controls for several minutes, then shook his head. Captain, they are not answering our messages. I have tried every frequency and every language in our computer. They are just moving closer. Taeho made a decision that he would regret for the rest of his life. Start moving us away from the planet, slowly. Do not make any sudden moves. We do not want to seem like a threat, but it was too late. The alien ship suddenly shot forward with impossible speed. In seconds, it was right next to New Seoul. Taeho could see strange symbols carved into its hull and what looked like viewing ports that glowed with red light. Then everything went wrong. The lights on the bridge started flickering. The computer screens showed error messages. The ship shook like something had grabbed it and was holding it tight. Jinwoo's voice came through the speaker, sounding panicked. Captain, the engines just died. Something is jamming all our systems. A new sound filled the ship. It was like metal being torn apart, mixed with a low humming noise. Taeho had never heard anything like it before. It made his skin crawl and his teeth hurt. So-young grabbed his arm and pointed at the security monitors. The screens showed the cargo bay, and Taeho saw something that made his blood turn cold. Dark shapes were moving through the corridors. Shapes that looked almost human, but wrong somehow. They moved too fast and too quietly. The security cameras started going out one by one. First the cargo bay, then the lower decks, then the crew quarters. Each screen went black with a burst of static. Captain, someone is on our ship. Minho whispered. Taeho reached for the ship's weapon controls, but found them dead. The unknown ship had disabled everything important. They were helpless, floating in space with invisible enemies moving through their home. The intercom crackled, and Dongsu's voice came through. Captain, there is something in the dining hall. I can hear it moving around, but I cannot see anything. Please help us. Before Taeho could answer, the intercom went silent. So-young checked her medical scanner. The life signs detector is showing our crew members, but some of the signals are getting weaker. Captain, I think people are getting hurt. More sounds came from inside the ship, strange clicking noises, like insects talking to each other. Taeho realized these were not sounds any human would make. Whatever was on their ship was not from Earth. The bridge door suddenly made a loud bang, like something heavy had hit it from the other side. Then another bang, and another. Taeho grabbed So-young and Minho pull back to the emergency shelter. Now they ran through the ship's corridors, but everywhere they went, they found signs of their friends. The walls had strange green stains that glowed in the dark. Some doors were torn completely off their hinges. There were claw marks in the metal walls that were too deep and too sharp to be made by any tool. Taeho knew when they reached the crew quarters, they found Jinwoo's tool belt on the floor, covered in the same green glowing liquid. But Jinwoo was nowhere to be seen. So-young knelt down and scanned the liquid with her medical equipment. This is not human blood, she said quietly. This came from whatever is hunting us. The clicking sounds were getting closer now, and Taeho could hear something else. Heavy footsteps that did not sound like boots on metal. They sounded like claws. Captain Minho whispered, "Where is everyone?" Where did they all go? Taeho did not have an answer. He was starting to understand that his crew was gone, not just missing, but taken by creatures that hunted in the dark and killed without making a sound. His friends were dead, and he was next. The emergency shelter was just ahead, but as they ran toward it, Taeho heard So-young scream behind him. When he turned around, she was gone. The corridor was empty, except for her medical kit lying on the floor. Minho grabbed Taeho's arm. "Captain, we have to keep moving." But when Taeho looked at Minho, he saw fear in the young man's eyes that matched his own. They were alone on their own ship with invisible hunters who had already killed everyone else. The clicking sounds were all around them now. The great council chamber of the Cathara hunting fleet was a massive room carved from living stone that glowed with inner fire. 12 of the greatest war leaders sat in a circle around the center, where Velkar stood with Tai-Ho beside him. Human looked very small among these alien giants, but he held his head high and met their glowing eyes without fear. War Master Kethram was the oldest and most respected hunter in the fleet. He had led their people for over 200 cycles, and his body was covered in scars from 1,000 battles. His voice was like grinding stone when he spoke. "Explain yourself, Velkar. You bring prey before the council and claim it has value beyond trophy-taking. You speak of changing ways that have served us since the first hunt. This borders on madness." The other war leaders clicked their agreement. They had all heard rumors about Velkar's strange behavior, but seeing the human in their sacred council chamber was shocking. Many of them wanted to kill Tai-Ho immediately just for being there. Velkar stepped forward and spoke with confidence. "War Master and honored hunters, I have found something that may be the flame that burns eternal spoken of in our oldest legends. This human possesses warrior, spirit unlike anything we have encountered." Ridiculous, scoffed Cathedra, a female hunter known for her cruelty. "Humans are weak creatures that cry and beg when hunted. This one is no different from the thousands we have killed. Then test him." Velkar challenged. "If he is just weak prey, then prove it before us all. But if he shows the spirit I have seen, then perhaps we should listen to what he offers." Kethram studied Tai-Ho with ancient eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. Well, he said, "We will test this human. If he dies quickly, then we forget this foolishness. If he surprises us, then we will hear his words." The War Master gestured, and 3 young Cathara warriors entered the chamber. They were in their prime, strong and fast and eager to prove themselves by killing the famous human who had wounded Velkar. Each one was twice Tai-Ho's size and armed with razor-sharp claws. "Kill the human quickly," Kethram ordered. "Show us how weak his species truly is." The 3 young warriors advanced on Tai-Ho with confident grins on their alien faces. This would be easy sport, and they would be remembered as the ones who ended the foolish legend of the warrior human. But Tai-Ho did not try to run or fight. Instead, he stood calmly and began to speak. "Stop," he said in the Cathara language he had been learning. "I do not wish to fight you." The warriors paused in confusion. Prey that talked in their tongue was strange enough, but prey that refused to run was unheard of. "Why? Do you 3 attack me together?" Tai-Ho asked. "Are you not confident in your individual skills?" The insult stung, and the warriors looked at each other uncertainly. No Cathara warrior wanted to appear weak in front of the council. "You," Tai-Ho pointed, "at the first warrior. Your stance is too wide, and your left side is unguarded. Any skilled fighter could exploit that weakness." He turned to the second warrior. "You rely too much on your natural speed, but you telegraph your attacks. A clever opponent would use that against you." To the third, he said, "You have good instincts, but you let anger cloud your judgment. That will get you killed against a truly dangerous enemy." The council chamber erupted in confused clicking sounds. The human was not fighting back, but instead was teaching their warriors how to be better fighters. His observations were accurate and showed deep understanding of combat techniques. The 3 young warriors found themselves listening instead of attacking. They had been trained since birth to fight, but this small human was pointing out flaws in their technique that no one had ever noticed before. "Show me," Tai-Ho said to the first warrior. "Attack with your full strength, but guard your left side." The young Cathara did as instructed, and found that his attack was much more effective. The human nodded approvingly and made additional suggestions for improvement. Within minutes, the 3 warriors who had come to kill Tai-Ho were instead asking him questions about fighting techniques. The human's knowledge of combat was impressive, but even more impressive was his willingness to teach potential enemies how to be more dangerous. "This is impossible," muttered Kethra. Prey does not teach hunters how to hunt, but it was happening before their eyes. The three young warriors were learning from the human and becoming better fighters because of his guidance. When they finally tried to attack him again, their improved technique was obvious to all who watched, yet still, they could not bring themselves to kill their teacher. Enough called Kethram. The test is over. The three warriors stepped back and one of them spoke to the council. He teaches us to be stronger. Why would prey make hunters more dangerous? Because he is not prey, said. Velkar he is warrior, who fights not for himself but for others. That is the flame our legends speak of. War Master Kethram stood and walked slowly around Teho, studying him from every angle. Human, you have shown something unexpected but words, and fighting lessons are not enough to change thousands of cycles of tradition. Speak now. Tell us why we should abandon the hunt that defines our people. Tai-Ho looked around the circle of alien war leaders and took a deep breath. He knew his next. Words would determine not just his fate, but the future of both their species. Honored hunters, you are the most feared warriors in the galaxy. But fear is not respect. You can destroy any enemy you face, but destruction alone has no lasting purpose. Your legends speak of the flame that burns eternal because your people hunger for something greater than endless killing. The council listened in silence as Teho continued. Your home world dies and you search space for new meaning. But you will never find it through hunting the weak. True strength protects the helpless. Real warriors defend those who cannot defend themselves. The galaxy needs guardians, not predators. You speak of changing our nature. Kethram said, we are hunters. It is what we are. No, Teho replied. You are warriors, and warriors can choose what they fight for. Right now, you fight for trophies and entertainment. But you could fight for justice. You could be the shield that stands between evil and innocence. The idea was revolutionary and disturbing. Many of the war leaders clicked angrily at the suggestion, but others seemed thoughtful. The endless hunt had grown stale and purposeless in recent years. Perhaps the human offered a path to something more meaningful. Kethra spoke with contempt in her voice. You ask us to become servants to the weak. This goes against everything we believe. I ask you to become heroes. Teho responded, heroes are remembered forever, while hunters are only feared until they die. Your people could be legends, not just nightmares. The debate that followed raged for hours. Some war leaders wanted to kill Teho immediately for suggesting such radical changes. Others found themselves curious about this new way of thinking. The council chamber, filled with clicking arguments and heated discussions. Finally, Kethram called for silence. The ancient war master looked very tired, as if the weight of leading his people for so long was finally catching up to him. Human, your words are disturbing and strange, but they are not without wisdom. Our young warriors grow restless with hunts that have no greater purpose. Our people drift without direction since leaving our dying world. He paused and seemed to be weighing a decision that would affect the future of the Kethara Veri. Well, I make you this offer. If you can prove that this guardian path has merit by successfully leading us in defense of the innocent, then we will consider accepting you as battle king. But if you fail, then you will die and we will return to our old ways. The other war leaders clicked in shock. The idea of a human leading Kethara warriors was almost unthinkable, but Kethram was their leader and his word was law. Teho felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The lives of countless innocents across the galaxy now depended on his ability to transform the most feared hunters in space into their protectors. I accept your challenge, he said. Then we shall see if the flame that burns eternal truly burns within you. Kethram replied, May the ancient spirits guide us all, for we walk a path that has never been walked before. In the depths of space, a distress signal began broadcasting from a small human colony under attack by slave raiders. The test that would determine the future of two species was about to begin.